guys, this is the podcast on deterrence theory by Emma and Hazel.
Deterrence theory is rooted in the classical school perspective and refers to the idea that if humans make rational choices about committing crime, that is, if they weigh the pros and cons, then severe punishment will prevent crime.
As a purpose of sentencing, deterrence aims to prevent crime through the example of offenders being punished. General deterrence is directed at preventing crime among the general population, while specific deterrence is aimed at preventing future crimes by a particular offender.
On this podcast, we are going to talk about two types of deterrence that are still used in our criminal justice system today: specific deterrence and general deterrence.
So there's a few things that work and what don't work about deterrence theory. What works about deterrence theory is certainty, which is the biggest thing, which that refers to the likelihood of being caught and punished for the commission of a crime. So we want to think about certainty over severity, which is the length of a sentence, because that actually does not work, even though you would think that longer sentences would deter people from crime. There is no evidence that a deterrent effect increases when the likelihood of conviction increases. So basically, being caught is a better deterrence than punishment or increasing punishment. Another thing that works is police presence. Basically, when using police as guards and, just watchers, that deters crime, specifically using hotspots. When you see a police officer with handcuffs and a radio, criminals are less likely to offend. Age is also a huge factor. Young people are more prone to offending, while older people are not. Typically, you can grow out of criminal activity as you age, and studies show that there is a steep decline at about the age of 35. What doesn't work is prison. Short or moderate prison sentences tend to work as a deterrent. However, long sentences do not work. Prisons are good for keeping criminals off the street, but not for deterrence. Prisons may actually have the opposite effect. Persons who are incarcerated learn more effective crime strategies from one another, and time spent in prison may desensitize many to the threat of future imprisonment. So this actually does the opposite job of what you would think. You would think that sending people to prisons will actually lower crime rates, but that is not the case. It actually leads to higher rate of offending. Harsher punishments are also not effective because criminals aren't knowledgeable about the sanctions of crime, which leads to reoffending because they're not fully aware of what their crime may implement as a problem or have a punishment for. You wouldn't know what the direct punishment is. The death penalty is also not proven to be effective. There's no proof or evidence that this is an effective deterrent. And according to the National Academy of Sciences, research on deterrent effects of capital punishment is uninformative about whether capital punishment increases, decreases, or has no effect on homicide rates.
Okay, so a specific example of specific deterrence is the three strike laws. The first and second strikes usually apply to violent felonies like armed robbery, murder, or sexual assault. The third strike will have the individual face a harsher sentence or even life, and depending on the state, then the third offense doesn't have to be violent or serious. This law is part of the deterrence theory because it's basically used to deter crime. However, it has its pros and cons. Some pros are the deterrence aspect. This can deter crimes because of the guarantee of severe punishment, and it can also reduce crime by keeping reoffenders incarcerated. The cons are that this can lead to over-incarceration because of the strikes. People that commit minor crimes are also being incarcerated with harsh sentences. The problem of someone's environment can also be a con in this situation. It is easier for people in low income and bad neighborhoods to be affected by this because of the nature of where they are living. It is easier for them to commit crimes or be associated with criminal behavior in these neighborhoods. A real world example that we found is that of Leandro Andrade, who was sentenced to 50 years to life in California for stealing about $150 worth of videotapes from Kmart. Although he had been previously convicted of burglary, his third offense was pretty minor and not violent. This case was taken to the Supreme Court in Lacaille v. Andrade in 2003. However, the court ruled that it wasn't cruel and unusual punishment. In terms of the criminal justice system right now, there have been changes made. In California, Proposition 36, that was passed in 2012, they changed the three-strike law so that the individual can only be sentenced to life if the third strike is also violent.
Some other examples of specific deterrence would be traffic laws. So speed limits and traffic cameras are usually used to deter reckless driving. There's school policies, so strict rules against cheating will have severe consequences, which deter students from engaging in dishonest behavior. And another example could be a vet is charged with cruelty to animals. The judge might use specific deterrence as a basis for sentencing the vet to prison.
A specific example of general deterrence is the Scare Straight programs. These emerged in the 1970s, and they aim to deter juvenile offenders by exposing them to harsh realities of prison life. These programs include inmates intimidating the juveniles so that they can start to feel fear and therefore be deterred from committing the crimes. They also show the living conditions of prisons, the overcrowded cells, no privacy, and rigid rules. These programs also have some pros and cons. Some pros are that these programs seem to have an immediate impact on the juveniles. Some of them leave visibly scared. Another pro is that although these programs target juveniles, these TV shows can be watched by anyone, so even adults can see the conditions of prison life, which work as a deterrent for adults as well. Some cons are that these programs take a confrontational approach, which can cause psychological harm to these youths. Another con is that although there have been immediate impacts on juveniles, there is no long-term deterrent effect. In fact, there is research that shows that these programs could have increased reoffending. The last con we will mention is that these programs don't get to the root of the problem. That is, they focus more on instilling fear in the individual rather than addressing issues like poverty, family problems, mental health problems, and substance abuse. Not offering support for these issues, rehabilitation, or some sort of guidance won't make these programs an effective deterrent. Scare Straight programs are still used today, but alternative programs that focus more on helping juveniles rather than scaring them have been introduced. Mentorship programs that focus on having juveniles work with positive role models, and educational and vocational programs that offer job training and or educational opportunities for youth so that they can focus on these alternatives rather than going to the more criminal route.
So in general deterrence, policing is a huge factor because they're actually out and engaging with the public. This is also a subset called focus deterrence, and it really is focusing on the community and getting out there and engaging. This could also be called pulling levers. It is a focused strategy that attempts to deter specific criminal behavior through fear of specific sanctions or levers, as well as anticipation of beliefs for not engaging in crime. The police focus on engaging with those at high risk of being a party to violence, and they convey clear incentives for avoiding violence and deterrence for engaging in violence. So on the incentive side, there's job training and drug treatment, but on the deterrent side, there's receiving info on enhanced penalties that they will face if there are subsequent violent incidents. The focus part of it is enhanced prosecution for low-level offenses. Police ultimately decrease the opportunity that individuals have to commit crime and violence. They make local communities a partner in deflecting individuals away from crime. and they improve community police relations at the same time as deterring crime. The police focus on engaging over seeking strict rules for deterring, and equity is real and perceived fairness, which is extremely important in policing because it's crucial for long-term sustainability. So this is the deterrence theory. We hope you learned a lot. Thank you so much.